The fiery glow of the burning barn painted the Montana sky crimson as Penelope Jameson clutched 3-year-old Sarah against her chest, her cotton nightgown offering little protection against the biting autumn chill of 1878. Terror gripped her heart as she crouched behind an old oak tree, watching the silhouettes of the outlaws who had destroyed everything she held dear, their laughter cutting through the night like knives. "They're saying Pa stole gold that don't belong to him," Sarah whimpered, her small fingers digging into Penelope's shoulders. "Hush, sweetheart," Penelope whispered, brushing the child's dark hair from her tear-streaked face. "Your pa never stole nothing from nobody." The words felt hollow even as they left her lips. Thomas hadn't been her husband, but her brother, and he'd been keeping secrets, these past months' secrets, that had gotten him killed with a bullet between the eyes before they'd set fire to everything. Penelope's legs trembled from crouching too long, but she dared not move. The Blackwell Gang, 5 of the most notorious outlaws in the territory, were still searching the property. They wanted something Thomas had hidden, something worth burning down a homestead and murdering a man in front of his child. "We need to find that map," one of them shouted. "Boss says it weren't on him." "The girl might know," another replied, his voice sending shivers down Penelope's spine. "Or that sister of his. They gotta be around here somewhere." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. She had no map, knew nothing of gold. All she had was Sarah, now orphaned and dependent on her. Her brother's body lay somewhere in that burning inferno, along with everything they owned. The snap of a twig behind her made Penelope's blood run cold. Slowly, she turned, expecting to see the barrel of a gun. Instead, she found herself staring into the steel-gray eyes of a stranger, his finger pressed to his lips in a silent command. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dust covering his dark clothing. A star-shaped badge glinted in the firelight on his leather vest. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and a thin scar running across his left cheekbone. "Marshal Nathan Hayes," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. "Those men killed 3 people in Copper Creek last week. I've been tracking them." His eyes flicked to Sarah, then back to Penelope. "You need to come with me now." "I don't know you," Penelope replied, tightening her hold on Sarah. The marshal's expression softened. "Madam, those men will find you if you stay, and I don't reckon you want to discover what they'll do when they do." He gestured toward the darkness beyond the property. "My horse is tethered beyond that ridge. Follow my light. I'll get you both to safety." He produced a small, brass miner's lamp, adjusting its wick until it gave only the faintest glow, enough to guide them, not enough to be spotted from a distance. "They killed my brother," Penelope said, her voice breaking. "And they'll kill you both too if we don't move," Nathan replied, urgency evident in his tone. "Please, Miss Jameson, Penelope Jameson." "Miss Jameson, I give you my word as a United States Marshal that I'll protect you and the child. But we must leave now." A shout from near the house made the decision for her. The outlaws were coming closer. With her heart hammering in her chest, Penelope nodded and rose to her feet, adjusting Sarah on her hip. "Follow my light," Nathan whispered again, beginning to move silently through the trees. Penelope cast one last glance at the burning remains of her home before following the marshal into the darkness, carrying the sole remaining piece of her family against her chest. They moved through the forest like ghosts, Nathan leading the way with his lamp held low. Sarah, exhausted and traumatized, had fallen into a fitful sleep against Penelope's shoulder. The child was getting heavier with every step, but Penelope refused to stop or complain. "We're almost there," Nathan whispered after what felt like hours. "Just beyond these trees." True to his word, a large black stallion waited, tethered to a low-hanging branch. The horse snorted softly as they approached. "This is Midnight," Nathan said, patting the animal's neck. "He'll carry us all to town." "How far?" Penelope asked, her voice hoarse. "Too far to walk, especially with the child," Nathan replied, extinguishing the lamp and securing it to his saddle. "We'll ride through the night. I know a place they won't look for us." He took Sarah gently from Penelope's arms, allowing her to mount the horse first before handing the sleeping child back to her. Then he swung up behind them, his solid presence both reassuring and unsettling as his arms came around her to take the reins. "Hold tight," he instructed, and then they were moving, Midnight picking his way carefully through the forest before breaking into a smooth canter once they reached open ground. The rhythm of the horse beneath them and the warmth of the marshal at her back should have been comforting, but Penelope couldn't stop the silent tears that slid down her cheeks. Everything was gone. Thomas was gone. And she was fleeing into the unknown with a lawman and a child who would surely ask for her father come morning. "I'm sorry about your brother," Nathan said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "How did you know he was my brother?" Penelope asked, suspicious despite her grief. "I've been watching the Blackwell Gang for weeks," he explained. "I know they were looking for Thomas Jameson. When I saw you with the child, I figured you for his sister. The girl looks like him." Penelope swallowed hard. "She's all I have left." "You both survived," Nathan said firmly. "That's what matters now." They rode in silence after that, the vast Montana landscape unfolding around them under a sky studded with stars. Despite her exhaustion and grief, Penelope couldn't help but notice the beauty of it, a stark contrast to the horror they'd left behind. As the first light of dawn broke over the eastern hills, they approached a small, secluded cabin nestled among a stand of pines. Smoke curled from its chimney, and a corral with 3 horses stood to one side. "It's a way station," Nathan explained, slowing Midnight to a walk. "Run by an old friend of mine. We'll be safe here while I figure out our next move." "Our next move?" Penelope echoed, shifting Sarah in her arms. The child was beginning to stir. Nathan's expression was grim as he dismounted and reached up to help her down. "The Blackwell Gang won't stop looking for you, Miss Jameson, not if they think you know something about whatever they were after." "But I don't know anything," she protested. "That might not matter to them," he replied, taking Sarah and setting her gently on her feet as the child rubbed her eyes sleepily. "Where's Papa?" Sarah asked, looking around in confusion. Penelope knelt before her niece, taking the small hands in hers. How did one explain death to a child? "Papa had to go away, sweetheart. He can't come back, but he loved you very much, and now I'm going to take care of you." Sarah's bottom lip trembled. "Because of the bad men?" "Yes," Penelope answered, her throat tight. "But this is Marshal Hayes. He's helping us get away from the bad men." Sarah looked up at Nathan, studying him with solemn eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "Are you going to catch them?" Nathan crouched down to her level. "I'm going to try my best, little one. But first, I need to make sure you and your aunt are safe. Can you be brave for me?" After a moment's consideration, Sarah nodded, then slipped her hand into Penelope's. The door to the cabin opened, and an older man with a silver beard stepped out, a shotgun cradled in his arms. His suspicious expression softened when he saw Nathan. "Thought I heard horses," he called. "Wasn't expecting company, Hayes." "Trouble, Abe," Nathan responded. "Need a place to lay low." The man called Abe surveyed Penelope and Sarah, then nodded once. "Better come inside then. Got coffee on the stove and stew from last night." As they approached the cabin, Penelope couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a journey she'd never intended to take. Her life had been upended in a single night of violence, and now her future and Sarah's rested in the hands of a marshal with hard eyes and a gentle touch. She only hoped she wasn't making another terrible mistake by trusting him. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean, with a central fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 4 chairs, and 2 doors that presumably led to sleeping quarters. Abe Miller, as he introduced himself, moved about the small space with the efficiency of a man accustomed to living alone, serving up bowls of venison stew and pouring coffee for the adults and milk for Sarah. "Ain't much, but it'll fill your bellies," he said gruffly, sitting down across from them. Penelope hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was before her. She made sure Sarah ate first, then devoured her own portion, feeling some of her strength return with each bite. "Abe was a scout for the army before he retired," Nathan explained between mouthfuls. "Knows every inch of this territory. And I know trouble when I see it," Abe replied, giving Nathan a pointed look. "Those Blackwell boys are mean as snakes. What's their interest in these two?" Nathan glanced at Penelope, who was helping Sarah drink her milk. "They think Thomas Jameson had something they wanted, a map, from what I overheard." "I don't know anything about any map," Penelope said tiredly. "Thomas never said a word to me about gold or maps or anything that would make men want to kill him." "Men have killed for less," Abe remarked, refilling Nathan's coffee cup. "Especially men like the Blackwells." Sarah had finished eating and was now leaning against Penelope, her eyes drooping. The child had been through too much, and exhaustion was claiming her again. "You two can take my room," Abe said, nodding toward one of the doors. "Clean sheets on the bed. Hayes and I will bunk out here." "Thank you," Penelope replied gratefully, "for everything." As she carried Sarah to the bedroom, she heard Nathan begin speaking in low tones to Abe, discussing plans and options. The lawman was taking risks by helping them. She knew that much. The Blackwell Gang was notorious throughout the territory, and they had friends in high places, corrupt officials who looked the other way when cattle went missing or stage coaches were robbed. The bedroom was simple: a bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a basin for washing. Penelope laid Sarah down and removed the child's shoes before covering her with a quilt. The girl was asleep almost instantly. Penelope sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself a moment to process everything that had happened. Thomas was dead. Her home was destroyed. She was now solely responsible for a child who would grow up without her father, and somewhere out there 5 dangerous men were hunting them. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Nathan stood there, his tall frame filling the doorway. "How is she?" he asked, nodding toward Sarah. "Sleeping," Penelope answered. "Children are resilient, but—" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "But no child should have to endure what she has," Nathan completed for her, stepping into the room. He held out a folded shirt and pair of trousers. "Abe found these. They belonged to his daughter years ago. Might be a bit big, but they're clean." Penelope looked down at her nightgown, still covered in soot and dirt from their escape. "Thank you." Nathan hesitated, then sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Miss Jameson, I need to ask you some difficult questions." "About the map," she guessed. He nodded. "Did Thomas ever mention anything about a gold strike? Any papers or documents he might have hidden?" Penelope shook her head. "Thomas was a private man, especially these last few months. He'd been working at the Silver Bell mine until it closed down last spring. After that, he took odd jobs, sometimes disappeared for days at a time. Said he was looking for work in other towns." "The Silver Bell," Nathan repeated thoughtfully. "That was one of Carlton Blackwell's operations before the vein ran dry." "The gang leader owns mines?" Penelope asked, surprised. "Carlton Blackwell owns half this territory one way or another," Nathan replied grimly. Mining operations, cattle ranches, businesses in town, all purchased with money from less legitimate enterprises. So why would he think Thomas had something of his? Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair. That's what I aim to find out. But first, I need to get you both somewhere safer than this. Abe's place is remote, but the Blackwells know I've used it before. Fear clutched at Penelope's heart again. Where would we go? There's a town called Redemption, about 3 days' ride from here. Small, out of the way. A friend of mine is sheriff there. He can provide protection while I deal with the Blackwells. And what about after? Penelope asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her. If these men are as powerful as you say, they won't just forget about us. Nathan's gray eyes met hers, steady and determined. One step at a time, Miss Jameson. First, we get you safe. Then I find what they're looking for. And then I make sure they never threaten anyone again. His confidence should have been reassuring, but Penelope had seen the destruction these men were capable of. They killed my brother without hesitation, Marshal. What chance do you have against all of them? A small, grim smile touched Nathan's lips. I've been hunting men like the Blackwells for 10 years, Miss Jameson. I'm still here. They won't be expecting what's coming for them. There was something in his tone, a personal edge that suggested this was more than just another case for him. Before she could question it, however, he stood. Get some rest, he advised. We'll leave at first light tomorrow. It's a hard ride to Redemption. After he left, Penelope changed into the borrowed clothes, grateful to be out of her filthy nightgown. The trousers and shirt were indeed large, but with the sleeves rolled up and the pants tucked into her boots, they would serve. She lay down beside Sarah, pulling the child close. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the barn in flames, heard the outlaws' laughter, felt the terror of being hunted. But most of all, she thought of Nathan Hayes, a man who had appeared out of nowhere to save them, who now proposed to risk his life to protect them further. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if she had a choice. Dawn came too quickly. After a breakfast of cornbread and coffee, Abe packed provisions for their journey while Nathan saddled Midnight and 2 additional horses from Abe's corral. The bay mare is gentle, Abe told Penelope as she helped Sarah dress in a child's shirt and trousers he'd produced from a trunk. She'll serve you well. I can't take your horse, Penelope protested. You ain't taking her, Abe replied gruffly. She's alone. Hayes will bring her back when this is over. He looked down at Sarah, who was staring up at him with curious eyes. The little one can ride with you or Hayes. Whichever makes her feel safer. Outside, Nathan was checking the cinches on the saddles one final time when Penelope emerged with Sarah. The marshal had changed as well, now wearing a clean shirt under his leather vest, his badge polished and prominent. His gun belt hung low on his hips, the well-worn holster speaking to years of use. All set, he asked, his eyes scanning the tree line as he spoke. As much as we can be, Penelope answered, lifting Sarah onto the bay mare before mounting behind her. Nathan nodded to Abe, who stood on the porch with his shotgun. Keep your eyes open, old man. They might track us here. Let 'em come, Abe replied, patting his weapon. Been a while since I had some target practice. With final farewells exchanged, they set off, Nathan leading the way on Midnight, with Penelope and Sarah following on the bay mare. The third horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding, carried their supplies and Nathan's rifle in a scabbard alongside the saddle. They rode through forests and across open meadows, keeping to the less traveled paths. Nathan set a pace that was steady but not grueling, aware of his companion's limitations. Sarah, to her credit, remained alert and uncomplaining, occasionally pointing out wildlife or asking questions about the surroundings. As the day wore on, Penelope found herself studying Nathan Hayes more closely. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his life in the saddle, his eyes constantly moving, scanning for threats. There was a tension in his shoulders, though, a vigilance that never seemed to ease. "You've been a marshal long?" she asked during a brief rest to water the horses at a small creek. Nathan looked up from where he was refilling their canteens. 8 years with the badge. 2 years before that riding with a Texas Ranger company. That's a long time to chase outlaws. A shadow crossed his face. Started younger than most. Had my reasons. The same reasons you're so determined to catch the Blackwells, she pressed, sensing there was more to his pursuit than duty. Nathan capped the canteen, his movements deliberate. "The Blackwells aren't just outlaws, Miss Jameson. They're a cancer on this territory. Everything they touch turns to corruption and death." He stood, meeting her gaze directly. 5 years ago, they burned out a family near Fort Benton. Parents, 3 children. Only one survived, a boy of 12 who hid in a root cellar while his family was slaughtered. The story hit too close to what they'd just experienced. Penelope glanced at Sarah, who was crouched by the stream, watching minnows dart among the rocks. Why would they do such a thing? Same reason they came after your brother. The father had discovered something, a rich gold vein on land the Blackwells wanted. When he refused to sell, they eliminated the problem. Nathan's voice had gone flat, emotionless. That boy spent 3 years in an orphanage before running away. No one knows what happened to him. The way he told the story made Penelope wonder if there was a personal connection, but before she could ask, Nathan had moved on, checking the horses and signaling it was time to continue their journey. They rode until dusk, making camp in a sheltered hollow where the remains of an old fire pit suggested others had stopped there before. Nathan built a small, nearly smokeless fire while Penelope prepared a simple meal from their provisions. Sarah, exhausted from the day's travel, fell asleep almost immediately after eating, curled up in a blanket near the fire. "She's handling this better than most grown men would," Nathan observed, his voice soft so as not to wake the child. Penelope nodded, her eyes on her niece's peaceful face. "She's always been strong-willed, just like her father." She swallowed hard against the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. "I keep thinking I should have done more, should have known something was wrong when Thomas started acting strangely." "There's no way you could have known what would happen," Nathan said, pouring her a cup of coffee from the pot nestled in the coals. "Men like Thomas often try to protect their loved ones by keeping them in the dark." "Is that what you do, Marshal Hayes?" Penelope asked, accepting the cup. "Keep people in the dark to protect them." His eyes reflected the firelight as he studied her across the flames. "Sometimes secrets are necessary, Miss Jameson. Sometimes they are the only protection we can offer." "Not if those secrets get you killed," she countered. "Not if they leave a child orphaned and a family destroyed." Nathan was silent for a long moment. "You're right," he finally conceded. "But I suspect your brother thought he was doing what was best for you both." "And what about you?" Penelope persisted. "That story about the family near Fort Benton, there's more to it, isn't there?" The marshal's expression shuddered, becoming unreadable. "We should get some rest," he said, effectively ending the conversation. "I'll take first watch. I'll wake you in a few hours." Penelope wanted to press further, to understand the man who held their lives in his hands, but she recognized the wall he had erected. Whatever drove Nathan Hayes, he wasn't ready to share it, at least not with her. She arranged her blanket near Sarah's, drawing the child close for warmth as the night air grew colder. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of fire and faceless men laughing in the darkness. When Nathan gently shook her awake for her watch, The moon was high overhead, casting silver light through the trees. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced in the moonlight. "All quiet," he reported, handing her his revolver. "But stay alert. If you hear anything unusual, wake me immediately." "I've never fired a gun," Penelope admitted, holding the weapon awkwardly. Nathan's eyebrows rose. "Never, growing up in the territories. Thomas did all the hunting," she explained, "and the protecting." With a sigh, Nathan took the gun back and quickly showed her how to hold it, aim, and fire. "Just point and squeeze the trigger," he instructed. "The noise will likely scare off any animal, and it'll certainly alert me." As he settled onto his blanket, Penelope took up position on a rock where she could see the surrounding area. The night was alive with sounds. The soft hooting of an owl, the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush, the occasional snort from one of the horses. Her mind wandered back to the night of the attack, replaying the events, searching for any clue about what Thomas might have known or possessed that was worth killing for. He had been secretive these past months, often arriving home late, sometimes with unexplained cash. Once, she'd found him at the kitchen table with papers spread before him, which he had quickly gathered and hidden when she entered. Had those papers been a map? And if so, where was it now? The rest of the night passed without incident, and they broke camp at first light, continuing their journey toward redemption. The terrain grew more rugged as they traveled, with steep hills and rocky outcroppings that forced them to proceed more cautiously. By midday, Penelope noticed Nathan growing increasingly tense, frequently looking back the way they had come. When they stopped to rest the horses, she confronted him. "Someone's following us, aren't they?" she asked quietly, while Sarah was occupied with a small wooden horse Nathan had carved for her the previous evening. The marshal didn't bother denying it. "Two riders, keeping their distance. Spotted them about an hour ago." Fear tightened Penelope's chest. "The Blackwells, maybe. Or could be unrelated travelers." He didn't sound convinced of the latter. "Either way, we need to pick up our pace. There's an old hunting cabin about 10 miles from here. We can reach it by nightfall if we push on." "And then what?" Penelope asked. Nathan's hand rested on his gun. "Then we find out who's on our trail." They rode hard for the rest of the day, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. Sarah, sensing the urgency, remained quiet, clinging to Penelope as they navigated increasingly difficult terrain. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. "Perfect," Nathan muttered, pulling his hat lower. "Rain will slow us down, but it might hide our tracks." The rain intensified quickly, turning from a light drizzle to a heavy downpour that soaked through their clothes and made the trail treacherous with mud. Sarah whimpered against Penelope's chest, cold and miserable, despite the oilskin coat Nathan had draped over her. "There!" Nathan shouted over the storm, pointing to a dark shape among the trees ahead. "The cabin!" They urged their tired horses forward, reaching the dilapidated structure just as lightning split the sky overhead. The cabin was small and weathered, its roof sagging in one corner, but it was shelter from the storm. Nathan dismounted quickly, leading the horses to a lean-to attached to the side of the cabin. "Get inside," he told Penelope, helping her down with Sarah. "I'll take care of the horses." The interior of the cabin was dusty but dry. A crude stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a rickety table with 2 chairs stood in the center. A rope bed with a moldering mattress occupied one corner. Penelope set Sarah down and immediately began searching for dry wood to start a fire. By the time Nathan entered, dripping wet but with their supplies in hand, she had a small blaze going in the fireplace. The marshal nodded approvingly as he set down their bags. "Good work," he said, shrugging out of his wet coat. "Fire will help dry our clothes and keep us warm. And announce our presence to anyone within miles," Penelope pointed out. Nathan's expression was grim. "They already know where we are. This storm won't throw off experienced trackers for long." He moved to the cabin's single window, wiping condensation from the glass to peer out into the gathering darkness. The rain continued to fall in sheets, reducing visibility to almost nothing. "We should try to get some sleep," he suggested, turning back to her. "I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," Penelope argued, helping Sarah change into dry clothes from their packs. "We can take turns like before." Nathan seemed about to protest, then nodded reluctantly. "Wake me at midnight then." They shared a meager dinner of jerky and hardtack, the fire providing some comfort against the chill of the rain-soaked night. Sarah fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's hard travel. Penelope covered her with a blanket, then joined Nathan by the window. "Do you really think they'll come tonight? In this weather?" she asked, watching lightning illuminate the landscape in brief, stark flashes. "If it was me hunting someone, I'd use the storm as cover," Nathan replied, his eyes never leaving the darkness outside. "Approach when they think no one would be fool enough to travel." Penelope studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the determination etched into every feature. "You were going to tell me about that family near Fort Benton," she said quietly. "The ones the Blackwells killed." Nathan was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tight with controlled emotion. "My sister married a man named Ellis. Good man, hard worker. They settled near Fort Benton with their children, my niece and 2 nephews." He paused, swallowing hard. "Ellis discovered gold on their property, made the mistake of filing a claim before securing the land properly. Carlton Blackwell found out, offered to buy the land for a fraction of its worth." Penelope's heart sank, already guessing where the story was heading. "When Ellis refused to sell, the Blackwells came at night, killed everyone except my youngest nephew who hid in the root cellar." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "By the time I arrived, they'd been dead for 2 days. My nephew was still hiding, too terrified to come out." "I'm so sorry," Penelope whispered, understanding now the personal vendetta that drove him. "What happened to your nephew?" "I took him to my sister's parents in Missouri. They raised him while I hunted the Blackwells." His voice had grown distant, detached. "Been tracking them for 5 years. Got close a few times, but Carlton has friends in high places. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories, until now." "Now," Penelope echoed. Nathan finally looked at her, his eyes intense. "Whatever your brother found, whatever was on that map, it's important enough that Carlton sent his own sons to retrieve it. This is the closest I've come to bringing them all down." Realization dawned on Penelope. "You're using us as bait," she said, the words tasting bitter. "You knew they would follow us." "No," Nathan replied sharply. "I'm protecting you. But yes, I knew they would come after you with or without me. At least this way you have a fighting chance." Before Penelope could respond, a sound outside caught Nathan's attention. He motioned for silence, drawing his gun as he moved away from the window. The rain had lessened slightly, making other noises more discernible, including the soft splash of footsteps approaching the cabin. Nathan extinguished the lamp, leaving only the dim glow of the fireplace to illuminate the room. He positioned himself beside the door, gun ready. "Wake Sarah," he whispered. "Be ready to run if I tell you to." Penelope moved quickly to the sleeping child, gently rousing her. "Sarah, sweetheart, we need to be very quiet now," she murmured, gathering the girl into her arms. The footsteps drew closer, then stopped. For several heart-stopping moments, there was only silence broken by the patter of rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Then came a voice calling through the darkness. "Marshal Hayes, we know you're in there. Send out the woman and the child, and maybe we'll let you live." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Lyle Blackwell," he murmured to Penelope, "the oldest son. What do we do?" Penelope whispered, clutching Sarah tighter as the child began to tremble. "Is there a back way out of this place?" she asked urgently. Nathan shook his head. "Just the door and the window." "Hayes," Lyle called again. "You've got 1 minute before we start shooting." "The woman knows where the map is. We just want what's ours." "I don't know anything about a map," Penelope insisted, her voice rising with panic. "SHH," Nathan cautioned, his mind clearly racing for a solution. After a moment's consideration, he spoke quickly. "Listen to me. When I open the door, I want you to take Sarah and run for the horses. The bay knows the way back to Abe's place. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" Penelope demanded. "I'll hold them off as long as I can, then follow when it's clear." He met her eyes in the dim light. "You have to trust me, Penelope." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something in the way he said it made her believe him, despite her misgivings about his motives. 30 seconds, Hayes," Lyle shouted. Nathan moved to the door, his hand on the latch. "Ready." Penelope nodded, gathering Sarah closer. "Ready." "Now." Nathan yanked the door open and immediately fired 2 shots into the darkness. The answering gunfire was instant, bullets splintering the doorframe as Nathan ducked back inside. Penelope ran for the window, Sarah clutched against her chest. The child was crying now, terrified by the gunshots. Using her elbow, Penelope broke the glass and cleared the frame of shards before hoisting Sarah through. She followed quickly, landing in the mud outside as bullets continued to fly through the cabin behind them. The lean-to with the horses was only yards away, but it might as well have been miles with bullets flying and rain making the ground treacherous. Penelope ran, slipping and sliding, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. A figure loomed suddenly out of the darkness, blocking their path. Penelope skidded to a halt, nearly falling with Sarah in her arms. The man before them was tall and broad-shouldered, a rifle in his hands. Lightning flashed, illuminating a face dominated by a bushy beard and cold eyes. "Well now," he drawled, "looks like the little birds are trying to fly away." Penelope backed away, searching desperately for an escape route, but the man followed, his rifle trained on them. "Where's that map, lady? Tell me now, and I might let the kid live." "I don't have any map," Penelope cried, backing away until her shoulders hit the rough logs of the cabin wall. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wrong answer," the man snarled, raising his rifle. A shot rang out and the outlaw jerked, his face registering surprise before he crumpled to the ground. Nathan stood several yards away, his smoking gun still raised. "Get to the horses," he shouted, firing again toward the front of the cabin where more of the gang were positioned. This time, Penelope didn't hesitate. She sprinted for the lean-to, Sarah bouncing against her as she ran. The horses were nervous, spooked by the gunfire, but the bay mare stood relatively steady as Penelope approached. With strength born of desperation, she lifted Sarah onto the saddle, then pulled herself up behind her. More gunshots sounded, closer now. Nathan appeared at the entrance to the lean-to, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "Go," he urged, reaching for Midnight's reins. "Head east. There's a ravine about 2 miles from here. I'll meet you there." "Nathan," Penelope called, using his given name without thinking. "Be careful." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he swung onto Midnight's back. "Always am, Miss Jameson." They rode out together, Nathan immediately breaking away to draw fire from Penelope and Sarah. The ruse worked. Most of the gunshots followed him as he zigzagged across the clearing in front of the cabin. Penelope drove the bay mare hard, following Nathan's directions eastward, away from the gunfire. Sarah clung to the saddle horn, sobbing but bravely holding on as they galloped through the rain-soaked forest. The ravine Nathan had mentioned appeared suddenly, a deep gash in the earth, its sides steep but navigable in places. Penelope guided the mare down a gentler slope, finding shelter beneath an overhang of rock. There, she dismounted and lifted Sarah down, holding the trembling child close. "It's all right," she murmured, though she felt anything but certain. "The marshal will find us," he promised. They waited, the minutes stretching endlessly as the storm gradually moved off to the east. Sarah eventually fell into an exhausted sleep against Penelope's chest, but Penelope remained alert, straining to hear any sound of approach over the diminishing rainfall. After what seemed like hours, the soft nicker of a horse announced Nathan's arrival. He appeared at the edge of the ravine, leading Midnight down the slope. Even in the faint moonlight that now penetrated the clouds, Penelope could see he was injured. He rode hunched over, one arm pressed to his side. "Nathan," she called softly, relief flooding through her. He dismounted with visible effort, tethering Midnight beside the bay mare before approaching them. Now, Penelope could see the extent of his injuries. Beyond the cut on his forehead, his shirt was soaked with blood on one side, and he moved with the careful gait of a man in considerable pain. "You're hurt," she said, gently laying Sarah down on her coat before moving to help him. "Bullet grazed my ribs," Nathan explained, wincing as he sat heavily on a boulder. "Nothing serious." "Let me see," Penelope insisted, reaching for his shirt buttons. To her surprise, he didn't protest, allowing her to open his shirt and examine the wound. The bullet had indeed grazed him, leaving a deep furrow across his right side that bled freely but didn't appear life-threatening. "We need to clean and bandage this," she said, moving to their saddlebags for supplies. "Later," Nathan replied, his voice tight with pain. "We need to move. I only got 2 of them. The others will be searching by first light." "You're in no condition to ride," Penelope argued, returning with a canteen and clean cloth. "No choice," he muttered, but he allowed her to quickly clean the wound and bind it with strips torn from her petticoat. As she worked, Nathan watched her face, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You did well back there," he said finally. "Most people would have panicked." "I was terrified," Penelope admitted, tying off the bandage, "but Sarah needed me to be brave." "That's real courage," Nathan replied. "Being afraid but doing what needs doing anyway." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection forged in shared danger. For a moment, Penelope forgot their desperate situation, aware only of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers and the intensity of his gaze. A twig snapped somewhere above them, breaking the spell. Nathan's hand immediately went to his gun, his body tensing despite his injury. "We need to go," he whispered, standing with effort. "Now." They roused Sarah, who whimpered in protest but didn't cry as they mounted up again. This time, Nathan insisted the child ride with him. "Your mare's tired," he explained. "Midnight's stronger and can carry us both." With Sarah secured in front of him, Nathan led the way along the bottom of the ravine, following its winding course through the wilderness. The rain had stopped completely now, and the moon provided enough light to travel by, though they proceeded cautiously to avoid injuring the horses on the rocky ground. "Where are we going?" Penelope asked quietly as they rode side by side where the ravine widened. "Change of plans," Nathan replied, his voice strained. "Redemption's too far with me injured and them on our trail. We'll head for Clearwater instead. It's smaller, but there's a doctor there who knows me. We can send a telegram to Redemption from there, get reinforcements." They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses or check Nathan's wound, which had begun bleeding again despite Penelope's bandaging. By dawn, his face was pale and drawn with pain, though he refused to complain or slow their pace. The ravine eventually opened onto a broad valley with a river winding through its center. In the distance, the tiny settlement of Clearwater was visible, a cluster of buildings nestled against the foothills, with wisps of smoke rising from morning cookfires. "Almost there," Nathan said, his voice weaker than before. They were crossing an open meadow when the shot rang out. Midnight screamed, rearing suddenly as blood blossomed on his shoulder. Nathan fought to control the panicked horse with one arm while holding Sarah secure with the other. "Ride," he shouted to Penelope as more shots followed, kicking up dirt around them. Penelope urged her mare forward, but instead of fleeing toward the town, she steered the horse alongside Midnight, reaching out to take Sarah as Nathan struggled to control his wounded mount. "Go ahead," Nathan insisted, trying to pass the child to her. "Not without you," Penelope cried, her heart racing as bullets continued to fly around them. With a supreme effort, Nathan managed to calm Midnight enough to transfer Sarah to Penelope's arms. The girl was crying again, clinging to Penelope as they galloped across the meadow toward the relative safety of a copse of trees near the river. They made it to the trees without being hit, though Nathan was swaying dangerously in his saddle by the time they reached cover. Midnight was limping badly, blood streaming down his dark shoulder. "They found us," Nathan stated the obvious, dismounting and nearly falling as his legs threatened to give way. Penelope helped him sit against a tree trunk, then quickly tied the horses deeper in the thicket where they wouldn't be immediately visible. Sarah huddled beside Nathan, her small face white with fear. "How many?" Penelope asked, peering cautiously from their hiding place. "3, maybe 4, Nathan answered, checking his revolver. "Lyle and his brothers." He looked up at her, his gray eyes clear despite his weakened state. "They won't stop, Penelope, not until they get what they want." "But I don't have what they want," she exclaimed in frustration. Nathan was silent for a moment, thinking. "Maybe you do," he said finally. "Not the map itself, but knowledge of where it might be." "I told you Thomas never think," Nathan interrupted. "Did your brother have a special hiding place, somewhere he might have concealed something valuable?" Penelope started to shake her head, then paused as a memory surfaced. "His Bible," she said slowly. "Thomas always kept our father's old Bible. He said it was the only thing he had from him. He was reading it the night before." She swallowed hard. "Before they came. And where is it now?" Nathan asked, a spark of hope in his eyes. "I don't know," Penelope admitted. "It wasn't with me when we fled. It must still be at the homestead or burned with everything else." Nathan cursed softly. "We need to know for certain." "You want to go back?" Penelope asked incredulously. "Back to where this all started. It might be our only chance to end this," Nathan replied grimly. "If the map was hidden in that Bible and if it survived the fire." "Even if it did, the Blackwells have probably found it by now," Penelope pointed out. "Maybe, maybe not." Nathan winced as he shifted position. "But first, we need to get past the ones hunting us now." As if on cue, a voice called from beyond the trees. "We know you're in there, Hayes. Send out the woman and child and you can die quick instead of slow." Nathan exchanged a look with Penelope. "Stay with Sarah," he whispered, struggling to his feet. "No matter what happens, don't leave this spot until it's safe." "You can barely stand," Penelope protested. "You can't fight them like this." Nathan checked his gun one last time. "Don't need to beat them," he replied with grim determination. "Just need to buy you time." He looked down at Sarah, who stared up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Be brave, little one. Your aunt will take care of you." Before Penelope could stop him, Nathan moved away through the trees, using their trunks for support as he positioned himself to defend them. "Come on out, Lyle," he called, his voice surprisingly strong. "Let's finish this man to man." Laughter answered him. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you, Marshal. And from the blood trail you're leaving, you ain't in no shape for a fair fight." "When have the Blackwells ever fought fair?" Nathan taunted. "Your father didn't fight fair when he murdered my sister's family." There was a moment of silence, then Lyle's voice again, closer now. "So that's what this is about. Revenge for those settlers near Fort Benton. Ancient history, Marshal." 5 years isn't ancient," Nathan replied, moving carefully from tree to tree. "And justice doesn't have an expiration date." Penelope held Sarah close, her heart pounding as she listened to the exchange. Nathan was drawing the outlaws away from their hiding place, sacrificing himself to give them a chance to escape. But escape to where? Clearwater was still a mile or more away, across open ground. They'd be spotted immediately if they tried to make a run for it. The crack of gunfire shattered her thoughts. The battle had begun. More shots followed, accompanied by shouts and the crash of bodies moving through underbrush. Penelope pressed Sarah's face against her shoulder, trying to shield the child from the violence even as she strained to see what was happening. A scream rent the air, not Nathan's voice, she noted with relief. 1 down, perhaps. But how long could one injured man hold off multiple attackers? The gunfire intensified, then abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. Penelope held her breath, waiting, praying. Footsteps approached their hiding place, slow, dragging footsteps. Penelope reached for a heavy branch lying nearby, prepared to defend Sarah with whatever means she had. Nathan appeared through the trees, blood streaming from a fresh wound on his left arm in addition to his previous injuries. But he was upright, and his eyes were clear as they met hers. "It's over," he said simply. "At least for now, all of them?" Penelope asked, hardly daring to believe it. 2 dead, Lyle wounded but escaped. Nathan sank down beside them, his strength finally giving out. "He'll be back with reinforcements as soon as he reaches his father." Penelope set the branch aside and moved quickly to examine his wounds. The new one was a clean through and through on his upper arm, painful but not immediately life-threatening. Combined with his previous injuries, however, Nathan was in serious danger from blood loss. "We need to get you to that doctor," she said firmly, tearing more strips from her petticoat to bind the arm. "No time," Nathan replied, his voice faint but determined. "Clearwater isn't safe now. Lyle will have men watching the approaches to town." He took a deep breath, visibly gathering his remaining strength. "We need to head back to your homestead. It's the last place they'll expect us to go." "That's at least 2 days' ride from here," Penelope protested. "You'll never make it in your condition." "No choice," Nathan insisted. "If that map is real, if it shows what I think it does, it could bring down the entire Blackwell operation." He looked at her intently. "This isn't just about revenge anymore, Penelope. It's about justice for everyone they've hurt, including your brother." Penelope wanted to argue further, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she nodded slowly. "All right, but we do it my way. You rest while I tend your wounds properly. Then we travel only as fast as your condition allows." To her surprise, Nathan agreed without protest, a testament to how badly injured he truly was. Penelope set to work immediately, using water from their canteens to clean his wounds before bandaging them as best she could with their limited supplies. Sarah watched the process with solemn eyes, occasionally handing Penelope items as needed. The child's resilience continued to amaze Penelope. She had witnessed horrors no 3-year-old should ever see, yet she remained brave and helpful beyond her years. By midday, they were ready to travel again. Nathan insisted on riding Midnight despite the horse's injury, saying the stallion would bear his weight better than the bay mare. The wound in the horse's shoulder had proven less serious than they'd feared. The bullet had only grazed the muscle, and the bleeding had stopped. They set off cautiously, keeping to the cover of the trees along the river as much as possible before turning northwest, away from Clearwater and back toward the mountains they had crossed days before. The journey would be arduous, especially with Nathan injured, but Penelope was determined to see it through. As they rode, a strange calm settled over her. The fear was still there, but it had been joined by something else, a fierce determination to end this nightmare, to find answers, to secure a future for Sarah. And, she realized with some surprise, to help Nathan Hayes find the justice he had sought for 5 long years. Night found them camped in a small cave formed by a rockfall along a steep hillside. The natural shelter offered protection from the elements and concealment from pursuers. Nathan had grown increasingly weak as the day progressed, eventually lapsing into a feverish state that worried Penelope greatly. She built a small fire at the mouth of the cave, where the smoke would disperse without creating a visible signal. After settling Sarah on a bed of pine boughs, she turned her attention to Nathan, who lay shivering despite the warmth of the fire and the blanket she had wrapped around him. "Nathan," she said softly, placing a cool hand on his forehead, "you're burning up." His eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever but still aware. "Had worse," he mumbled. "Just need rest." Penelope soaked a cloth in cold water from a nearby stream and placed it on his forehead. "You need a doctor," she corrected. "But since that's not an option right now, you'll have to make do with me." A small smile touched his lips. "Could do worse." She found herself returning the smile despite their desperate circumstances. Over the past days, her feelings toward Nathan Hayes had transformed from suspicion to respect, to something deeper she wasn't ready to name. He had saved their lives multiple times, had put himself in danger to protect them, and was now risking everything to help them find answers. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly, the question that had been nagging at her finally finding voice. "Really? It's not just about the Blackwells or what happened to your family, is it?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his feverish gaze fixed on the ceiling of the cave. "5 years ago," he began slowly, "after my sister and her family were killed, I made a promise, not just to find the men responsible, but to become the kind of lawman who prevents such things from happening to others." He shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. "I've failed more times than I've succeeded, but when I saw you and Sarah that night, when I saw what they'd done to your brother and your home—" He trailed off, emotion making his voice rough. "You saw a chance to keep your promise," Penelope finished for him. "Yes." His eyes met hers, fever bright but sincere. "And something more, something I can't explain yet." The intensity of his gaze made her heart beat faster. Before she could respond, however, Sarah stirred on her pine bed, whimpering in her sleep. Penelope moved immediately to comfort the child, stroking her hair until she settled again. When she returned to Nathan's side, his eyes had closed, his breathing becoming more regular as exhaustion claimed him. Penelope adjusted the cloth on his forehead and settled beside him to keep watch through the night, her mind full of questions without answers. Morning brought improvement in Nathan's condition. The fever had broken during the night, and though he was still weak, his eyes were clear, and he insisted on continuing their journey. "We can't stay in one place too long," he explained as Penelope helped him mount Midnight. "Lyle will have men searching everywhere by now." They traveled more slowly that day, keeping to the high ground where they could observe the terrain around them. The landscape grew increasingly familiar to Penelope as they approached the region where her homestead had stood. By late afternoon, she recognized a distinctive ridge that marked the boundary of what had once been their property. "It's just beyond those trees," she told Nathan, pointing to a grove of aspens whose leaves shimmered gold in the autumn sunlight. They approached cautiously, tethering the horses in a hidden gully before proceeding on foot. Nathan moved with difficulty, but insisted on leading the way, his gun drawn and ready. Sarah remained with the horses, securely hidden and instructed to stay absolutely quiet until they returned. The scene that greeted them as they emerged from the trees was one of utter desolation. The barn was nothing but charred timbers and ash. The house had fared little better, its walls still stood in places, but the roof had collapsed, and everything inside had been consumed by the flames. "Oh, Thomas," Penelope whispered, grief washing over her anew at the sight. Nathan placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, then scanned the area carefully. "No sign anyone's been here recently," he observed. "Let's check what's left of the house." They picked their way through the ruins carefully. The floorboards had burned through in places, creating treacherous holes into the root cellar below. The furniture was reduced to blackened frames, and most smaller items had been destroyed completely. Where would Thomas have kept the Bible? Nathan asked, surveying the destruction. Penelope moved toward what had been her brother's bedroom. "He usually kept it beside his bed," she replied, navigating around a fallen beam. "But if he thought it contained something valuable—" She paused, a memory surfacing. "The loose floorboard," she said suddenly. "Thomas had a hiding place under a floorboard near his bed. I caught him putting something there once, though he claimed it was just some money he was saving." Together, they cleared debris from the area she indicated. Most of the floorboards were charred but still intact. Nathan knelt painfully, testing several until one moved slightly under pressure. "Here," he said, working his knife into the edge of the board to pry it up. The space beneath was small, barely large enough for a few items. And there, wrapped in oilskin that had protected it from both fire and water, was a leather-bound Bible, its cover worn with age and use. "Thomas," Penelope breathed, taking the book with trembling hands. "You clever man." She unwrapped it carefully, opening the cover to reveal the family record page where births, deaths, and marriages had been recorded for generations. Nothing unusual appeared there, nor in the pages that followed as she carefully turned them. "It must be hidden somehow," Nathan suggested, watching her examination. Penelope nodded, continuing to flip through the familiar text. Near the middle of the book, she noticed something odd. Several pages seemed slightly thicker than the rest. Examining them more closely, she realized 2 pages had been carefully glued together, creating a pocket between them. "Here," she said, showing Nathan. "Something's hidden inside these pages." With painstaking care, she worked her fingernail into the nearly invisible seam between the pages, separating them just enough to extract what lay between. A folded piece of parchment, covered in precise drawings and notations. "The map," Nathan confirmed, his eyes widening as Penelope unfolded it. "But this isn't just a map to a gold strike." Indeed, the document showed not only the location of a mine, but detailed accounts of shipments, payments, and names, a complete record of the Blackwell operation's illegal activities spanning several years. "This is evidence," Nathan said, his voice tight with excitement despite his weakened condition. "Evidence of bribery, theft, murder, everything I've been trying to prove for years." Thomas must have found this at the Silver Bell, Penelope realized. That's why he'd been acting so strange. He knew what he'd discovered, and knew how dangerous it was, Nathan added grimly. The Blackwells would kill anyone to keep this secret and have. A noise outside froze them both. The unmistakable sound of approaching horses. "We need to go," Nathan whispered, carefully refolding the map and tucking it inside his shirt. "Now." They moved swiftly through the ruins, staying low to avoid being seen through the broken walls. At the edge of the house, Nathan peered out cautiously, then pulled back quickly. 5 riders, he reported, Carlton Blackwell himself and 4 others, including Lyle. Penelope's heart sank. "They've found us." "Not yet," Nathan replied, already planning their escape. "There's a back window we might be able to use. Once we're in the trees, we can make it to the horses and Sarah." "And then what?" Penelope asked. "Where can we go that they won't find us?" Nathan's expression was resolute. "We take the fight to them." Before she could question this seemingly suicidal plan, a voice called from outside. "Marshal Hayes, I know you're in there." The voice was cultured, authoritative. Carlton Blackwell, Penelope guessed. "Come out now and I'll allow the woman to live." Nathan's jaw tightened. "He's lying," he whispered to Penelope. "He can't afford to leave any witnesses." "I'm growing impatient, Marshal," Carlton called. "Perhaps this will motivate you." There was a brief commotion, then a sound that turned Penelope's blood to ice. Sarah's frightened cry. "No," she gasped, moving instinctively toward the sound before Nathan caught her arm. "They found her," Nathan said, his face pale with rage. "They found her while we were in here." Penelope pulled against his grip. "Let me go, I have to help her." "And get yourself killed," Nathan hissed. "Think, Penelope, that's exactly what they want." "I have the child, Marshal," Carlton announced, his voice smug. "Such a pretty little thing. It would be a shame if something happened to her." Sarah cried out again, the sound piercing Penelope's heart like a knife. She met Nathan's eyes, desperation clear in her expression. "I can't let them hurt her." Nathan's mind was racing, searching for a solution. After a moment, he nodded grimly. "We'll give them what they want or what they think they want." He quickly explained his plan. It was dangerous, with little chance of success, but it was their only hope of saving Sarah and escaping alive. Penelope moved to the front door of the ruined house, her hands raised. "Don't hurt her," she called out. "I'm coming out." She stepped through the doorway into the harsh sunlight. 5 men on horseback waited in what had once been her front yard. In front of them, held firmly by a man with a cruel face and Carlton Blackwell's aristocratic features, sat Sarah, tears streaming down her small face. "Aunt Penny," the child cried, reaching for her. "It's all right, sweetheart," Penelope replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Everything's going to be fine." Carlton Blackwell was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, his silver hair and neatly trimmed beard giving him the appearance of a respectable businessman rather than the ruthless criminal he was. He smiled coldly at Penelope. "Miss Jameson, I presume," he said. "Where is Marshal Hayes?" "He's injured," Penelope answered truthfully. "He can barely stand." "And yet he continues to be a thorn in my side," Carlton remarked. "Call him out, Miss Jameson. I grow weary of this game." Penelope glanced back at the house. "Nathan," she called. "They have Sarah. You have to come out." There was a pause, then Nathan appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. He looked even worse than before, pale and weak, barely able to support his own weight. His gun hung at his side, not raised. "Carlton Blackwell," he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his condition. "Finally face to face after all these years." "Marshal Hayes," Carlton replied with mock cordiality, "you've led us on quite a chase, but it ends here." He nodded to one of his men who dismounted and moved toward Nathan. "The map, if you please," Carlton continued. "I know you found it. Give it to us now, and perhaps I'll consider letting you live long enough to reach a doctor." Nathan coughed, a wet sound that suggested internal injuries. "Why?" he asked. So you can continue murdering innocent people, like my sister's family, like Thomas Jameson. Carlton's expression hardened. Business is business, Marshal. Some people simply get in the way of progress. Progress, Nathan laughed bitterly. Is that what you call theft and murder? As he spoke, Nathan had been slowly moving forward, drawing attention away from the house behind him. Penelope watched anxiously, knowing what would happen next, praying the plan would work. Enough talk, Carlton snapped, gesturing to the man approaching Nathan. Get the map. The outlaw reached Nathan, roughly patting him down until he found the folded parchment inside his shirt. Got it, boss, he called, waving the map triumphantly. Bring it here, Carlton ordered. And then kill them both. The child too, no witnesses. The outlaw turned back toward his boss, map in hand. That was the moment Nathan had been waiting for. With strength that seemed impossible given his injuries, he drew his gun and fired directly into the outlaw's back. The man fell with a cry of surprise, the map fluttering from his grasp. Chaos erupted. Penelope dove for Sarah as the remaining outlaws opened fire on Nathan, who had ducked behind a water trough that had somehow survived the fire. Bullets splintered the wood around him as he returned fire, taking down another outlaw with a well-placed shot. Penelope reached Sarah, pulling the child from Carlton's grasp as the older man was distracted by the gunfight. She ran for the cover of a stone well on the far side of the yard, bullets kicking up dirt at her heels. Stay down, she told Sarah, pushing the child into the relative safety of the well's stone enclosure. Looking back, she saw Nathan engaged in a desperate firefight against 3 remaining outlaws, including Lyle and Carlton Blackwell. Despite his injuries, Nathan was holding his own, but he was outgunned and outnumbered. A decision crystallized in Penelope's mind. She couldn't leave him to die while she escaped with Sarah. Not after all he had done for them. Not after what they had been through together. Sarah, stay here and don't move, she instructed firmly. I'm going to help the marshal. Before the child could protest, Penelope was moving, circling around the edge of the property to approach the outlaws from behind. She had no weapon, no plan beyond creating a distraction that might give Nathan a chance. Lyle Blackwell had dismounted and was working his way around the water trough, intending to flank Nathan. Penelope picked up a heavy branch from the ground and, summoning all her courage, rushed at him from behind. The branch connected with Lyle's head with a satisfying crack. He staggered, dropping his gun as he fell to his knees. Penelope didn't hesitate. She snatched up the weapon and aimed it at him with shaking hands. Don't move, she warned, her voice steadier than she felt. Lyle glared up at her, blood streaming from a cut on his temple. You'll pay for that, woman, he snarled, starting to rise. Penelope fired. The recoil nearly knocked her off her feet, but her aim was true. Lyle Blackwell collapsed, a look of stunned disbelief on his face as life left his eyes. The gunshot drew the attention of Carlton and his remaining man. In that moment of distraction, Nathan fired twice in rapid succession. The last henchman fell, leaving only Carlton Blackwell standing, his gun trained on Nathan. It's over, Carlton, Nathan called, rising painfully to his feet. Drop the gun. Carlton's aristocratic features twisted with rage. Nothing is over, he shouted, swinging his weapon toward Penelope instead of Nathan. 2 shots rang out simultaneously, Nathan's and Carlton's. Penelope felt something burn across her arm as she was knocked backward by the impact. Through a haze of pain, she saw Carlton Blackwell fall, a red stain spreading across his expensive coat. Penelope, Nathan's voice seemed to come from far away as he staggered toward her. I'm all right, she managed, looking down at her arm where Carlton's bullet had grazed her. Just a scratch. Nathan reached her, dropping to his knees beside her with the last of his strength. His face was deathly pale, but his eyes were clear and focused on her. "You saved my life," he said simply. "You saved ours first," Penelope replied, then remembered with a jolt of fear. "Sarah." "Here, Aunt Penny." The child's voice came from behind the well where she had obediently remained hidden. As Sarah ran to them, Nathan retrieved the map from where it had fallen. "This is over," he said, looking at the document that had cost so many lives. "Finally over." 3 days later, Penelope sat beside Nathan's bed in the doctor's house in Clearwater. His recovery had been touch and go at first. The blood loss and infection from his wounds had nearly claimed him. But he was strong, the doctor had said, with a will to live that defied medical explanation. Sarah played quietly on the floor nearby, arranging a set of wooden blocks the doctor's wife had found for her. The child seemed to be healing from her ordeal, though she still had nightmares that brought her crying into Penelope's arms in the dark hours of the night. The map had been sent by special courier to the territorial governor, along with Nathan's detailed report of the Blackwell Gang's crimes. Word had already returned that arrests were being made of officials who had been in Carlton Blackwell's pocket, and the family's assets were being seized pending investigation. Justice at long last. Nathan stirred, his eyes opening to find Penelope watching him. A smile touched his lips. "You're still here," he observed, his voice stronger than it had been the day before. "Where else would I be?" she replied, returning his smile. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "When I'm well enough to travel," he began, then hesitated. "That is, if you haven't made other plans." "We have nowhere to go, Nathan," Penelope reminded him gently. "Our home is gone." "I know a place," he said, his gray eyes serious as they met hers. "A small ranch near Redemption. It belonged to a friend who died last year. He left it to me, but I've never had time to see it, much less live there." He squeezed her hand. "It's not much, I'm told. Just a house, a barn, some good grazing land, but it could be a home." Penelope's heart quickened. "What are you saying, Nathan?" "I'm saying that somewhere between that burning barn and this bed, I fell in love with you, Penelope Jameson," he replied simply. "You and Sarah both. I'm asking if you might consider making a new start with me." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "You hardly know me," she whispered. "I know enough," Nathan countered. "I know you're brave and loyal and fierce when those you love are threatened. I know you kept your head when most would have lost theirs. I know you're the kind of woman I've been looking for my whole life without realizing it." He raised their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer. Take all the time you need. Just know that wherever I go from here, I want you and Sarah with me if you'll have me." Penelope looked at Sarah, happily playing nearby, then back at the man who had risked everything to save them. The man who now offered them not just protection or security, but love and family, the things they needed most. "I don't need time," she said softly. "We've both lost too much to waste what time we have." She leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. "Yes, Nathan Hayes, we'll build a new home with you." His smile was like the sunrise after the longest night, full of promise and hope for the days to come. 6 months later, Penelope stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching Nathan teach Sarah how to ride her new pony in the fenced corral nearby. The child's laughter floated on the spring breeze as the little mare trotted in circles with Nathan leading her by a rope, his limp from his injuries barely noticeable now. The ranch had proven to be more than not much. It was a beautiful piece of land with a sturdy house, a good barn, and enough pasture for the small herd of cattle Nathan had purchased with the reward money from bringing down the Blackwell operation. They had been married 3 months ago, a simple ceremony in Redemption's small church with the entire town in attendance. The people had embraced them warmly, especially Sarah, who had blossomed under the love and security of their new life. Penelope rested her hand on her stomach, where the first signs of their child had begun to show. They had created this new life together, a family forged in fire and danger, strengthened by shared struggle, bound by love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan looked up from his lesson with Sarah, his eyes finding Penelope on the porch. He smiled, that special smile he reserved only for her, and touched his hat in a gesture that had become their private signal of affection. Penelope returned the smile, thinking of how far they had come from that terrible night when outlaws had torched the barn. She had carried a frightened child in her arms, and a wounded lawman had ridden out of the darkness with the words that had saved their lives. "Follow my light." She had followed, not knowing where the path would lead. It had led here to home, to family, to love, to a future bright with promise and the peace they had all fought so hard to find.